today's topic, we are looking at how do we win our congregation over to being first 1,000-day friendly church. Many of you in the room, all of us in the room, we carry on our heart the young children in our community, we carry on our heart the families in our community, we carry on our heart this idea of the first 1,000 days and its importance. But how do we share that? How do we inspire others to get involved? And that is what I want us to unpack today. My hope is that by the end of today's conversation, you will really have some practical ideas of what you potentially could be doing, or sparking with some new ideas of things that you can be doing to inspire, to get others involved, to share this vision with your congregation. And so the first idea that I want to drop in is this idea of what we call a 1-minute elevator pitch. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about an elevator pitch, but the idea is that an elevator pitch is a short motivational story that captures the big why and stirs the hearts of those people that you're talking about. So if you had to imagine yourself climbing into an elevator, you bump into a stranger and they ask you what you do, and you give them a 1-minute quick, this is what I do, and the elevator doors open and they've got a sense of why. That's what you want to do with your elevator pitch, is share your heart quickly and succinctly around the importance of this phase and why you feel passionate about it. And so I encourage you to think about, what is your motivation? What is your big aha, your personal why you want to be engaged with the first 1,000 days and see your church involved? Each of our stories will look a little bit different. Each of our 1-minute pitches will look a little bit different, and your motivation to be engaged in the first 1,000 days. I know for myself, that quote that we use quite regularly in Sikunye is that if you pay attention to the beginning of the story, you can change the whole story. I feel like that quote really captures for me this idea of why we want to pay attention right at the beginning of the story. How I hear so many times of the struggles that people are having in teenage years and in adulthood, and so often in development, going, oh, if only we could go right back to the beginning of the story. And so I really see that the church is the hope of the world, and that God has marvelously given us the church to be a family, to love one another and to care for one another, and that there isn't a more beautiful place for that to happen with the first 1,000 days. And I see this beautiful tapestry coming together when I think of the first 1,000 days, what the church can be doing and how we can invest in right in the beginning, and what significant change that could make for the future. And so that gets my heart singing. And I encourage you to think about, what is it that makes you passionate about this? That in the church, we see this idea of community, family, and love, and we're wanting all of our church members to be reaching out to others, to loving their neighbors, to being part of the mission of the church. And we want to stir our congregation to be on mission, to be loving one another, not just to come into church to see what they can receive, but also how they can care for others. So as you reflect on your 1-minute pitch, I encourage you to write it down, test it, think about it. If somebody said to you why you're involved in this, what would you say? And so, yeah, that's some homework for you. Think about, what is your big why? Why are you involved in this? So when we think about what is a first 1,000-day friendly church, if we are going to share this with our churches, we need to have a clear picture for ourselves of what is a first 1,000-day friendly church, and why we believe churches all across South Africa can be first 1,000 days. And so in the chat box, I want you to very quickly tell me, what do I mean by FTD? If I say FTD-friendly church, you're stirring your congregation to be an FTD-friendly church. What do we mean by first 1,000 days? You're welcome to put that into the chat box. What comes to mind when we say first 1,000 days? This isn't a trick question. I'm hoping this is at the top of your fingers as you think about what is first 1,000 days. Anybody want to unmute and just shout it out? or put it into the chat box. What do we understand by first 1,000 days? From conception to 3 years, Luetta? Okay, good. From conception. Anybody else want to add to that? So we are looking right at the beginning, from the beginning of pregnancy. We're looking at early childhood, right at the beginning. So I'm going to suggest that, okay, so Reverend Pele, good. Conception to 2 years. So the question is 2 or 3 years. So we are completely right. Conception to 2 years. When we think about first 1,000 days, we're thinking the first 2 years. We do know that when we think about early childhood development spans all the way to pre-grade R, so 6 or 7 years, and there's great foundational development that's happening in that window. And so a 3-year-old is still developing, still growing, still needs all that care and support. But first 1,000 days, we're looking at the days of pregnancy, the first year of life, and the second year of life. And those add up to the first 1,000 days. So when we are talking to our churches and our congregants about this, it's important for them to have this picture in their mind of this early window of a child's life, right from when mom's pregnant until the child's second birthday is the window that we're talking about. We know that all children, we want to see all children thriving, and early childhood development after 2 is important. But when we're trying to win them over to a first 1,000-day church, a first 1,000-day friendly church, we're looking at the specific window in time. So we're not thinking about how we can care about the 10-year-olds, although we do need to do something for the 10-year-old. We're talking about this very specific period of time because there's unique challenges and unique vulnerabilities in the first 1,000 days. And we see that, as we know, the science behind it saying that this is a foundational, once in a lifetime opportunity, and why it's so important for us to look at this window of time. So this is a first 1,000-day friendly church, is a church that is friendly to families in the first 1,000-day season. It is a church community that's actively caring for those families of young children. They're taking steps forward to seek out families, and they have things in place to make sure families are getting the kind of care that they need in the season. It's not about trying to be perfect and have the most perfect programs, but it is about trying to come together as a congregation to come around these families in the space. So when we think about a first 1,000-day friendly church, if you've attended our FTD, how to be an FTD friendly church, you would be familiar with our circle of what a first 1,000-day friendly church looks like. We as Sikunye see a first 1,000-day friendly church working into these 6 areas. They're not steps in a particular order, more like petals in a flower or slices in a pie. It isn't about getting all 6 of these areas all going at the same time. Most churches we know have chosen a few as their next steps to get moving. And as you inspire your church and get them on board, you might say, we are focusing on creating a warm and welcoming space and inspiring your church to think of that one area for now, or inspiring your church to be praying for children in the first 1,000 days. That might be the first step as you grow in this space. Each church is in a different space around that. And you can see that there are activities and things that you are already doing that can be adjusted to reach families of young children. And God has put a range of people in your congregation. And because of that, some of these petals are really simple and easy to get started. And others might take a bit longer, might take a little bit more planning, and that's okay. We always say in Sikunye, do what you can with what you have, what strengths and resources you have. And so for today's topic, we're looking, well, how do you get your congregation engaged into a first 1,000-day friendly church, that we are engaging in all of these 6 things, or as the church gets involved. And so we're looking at ideas and experiences of what might, some of you in the room have already been doing this, and you've already been engaging with your congregation, and so you can be sharing ideas in the chat box. We're wanting to get some ideas that we can put into practice. Why are we wanting to ensure this? Is that we see that we know it takes one loving, responsive adult to support a child, but that adult we want to see in a community that's caring for them, that idea of it takes a village to raise a child. And so we don't want just one team member in a church caring for all the families. We want the whole church on board. And so we're wanting to win them over, and we need to do this regularly because vision leaks. And good leaders find creative ways to keep the opportunity and passion high in people's mind. There's always new people visiting your church, and they might have missed the announcement once, and we need to keep sharing this vision, leading with vision, that the congregation can be on board, sharing the stories, that families know that this is a home for them to be part of. And so, like I said, it's not a one-person job. It's about how do we get every congregation has its gifts and its strengths, and how can we get those gifts and strengths utilized to support family. So my first question for you is, do you know who is in your congregation and what gifts and strengths you have, and what expertise and skills do you have in your congregation that can support families? So one of the steps that we can have in getting the church engaged is just getting to know who is in the church, and understanding who is in your church. So I know one church, when they were talking about being in the first 1,000-day friendly church, they discovered that they've got a dietitian in their church, and they've got a social worker in their church, and they've got these kinds of expertise of people that they could call on when they needed extra help and support in certain areas. And so taking an audit almost of who is in your church is helpful when trying to think about what gifts, what strengths do we have in our church. So winning your congregation over to being a modern day village is not just being a modern day team. It's about how our whole church is reaching out, and also thinking through the missional opportunity, reaching into welcoming new families into our community. So if you close your eyes for a minute and you imagine an antenatal class running in your church venue, and after this, which turns into a mom's group with babies, and these moms talk to other moms at the clinic, and as they're talking and sharing, they're inviting, and these moms are then curious to attend, and then they are feeling welcome in your church and feel like this is home. I have friends here, I have community here. And we see that people are added to our congregation, and this is an outreach that our congregation has. So the other day I bumped into a pastor, and he said, we've got new family mothers joining our moms group, and he got really excited. And that is this idea that we can be on mission, and there are missional opportunities to welcome in families, welcome in new moms and dads as a congregation. And part of that is about sharing that vision and inspiring our congregation to say, imagine us being the safe space for families, for welcoming moms, through our moms groups, through our antenatals, through how we are putting things in place. Imagine if families could say, this is a great place to bring my child to come. I feel like I can be here. And so as leaders, we're wanting to inspire our churches to do that. And that doesn't happen by once speaking up, but we're needing to speak up in multiple spaces. And as I'm talking, you're welcome to put stuff in the chat box. I'm going to ask you some questions in a moment. The next thing that we need to do is prayerfully discern. So part of getting our congregation involved is really praying, and really asking God to help you see what is He leading you and your congregation into. What are the unique strengths and opportunities that you have as a congregation? Praying into what are you going to call your congregation to? What is the best efforts that you as a congregation can do, and that you can lead your congregation into this? And so as you pray into this, I believe that God will also stir your heart and your passion towards those families and towards your congregation, and help your congregation also to have a heart towards it. That when we share our heart and passion with them, it already fits on fertile ground, because we've been praying with it. God is leading us in this space. And in order for you to inspire your congregation, is for you to be able to share your heart and passion around this topic. So one of the things that we need to be able to do is to grow our own awareness around and understanding around First 1,000 Days, so that when we talk about it to our congregation, we find it easy to talk about it. And so when you are speaking up and sharing about it, that they hear your heart and your voice. And some of us might feel like, oh, but I don't know how to talk about it. And this is where on our website we have various resources and videos to help you learn more about what is First 1,000 Days, what are the important building blocks, what are some of the facts that we need to be sharing with our congregants. So we think about the fact that all children need 5 building blocks to thrive: nutrition, good health, safety, security, opportunities for early learning, responsive caregiving. Unpacking that a little bit for your congregation would mean that you first need to come to understand and what that means. So I encourage you to read up more about it, to go onto our website and read and grow in your understanding. When we say this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, what do we mean by that? We mean that the brain is growing faster than any other time, and 1 million neuron connections are connecting per second. This is also when language development is peaking at 6 months of age. And so we see this window of time being a real critical time for us to pay attention to. And so as we share this with our congregation, we want to be sharing these kinds of facts with them that they can understand, and they understand that there are negative factors impacting the growth of the brain that can undermine a child's development and stop them from thriving and just see them surviving. And we want to call our churches to making a difference in South Africa in this space, and so helping them to imagine what that can look like for them. So this is about growing your understanding. The 4th step is about speaking up. And so most of what winning our congregation over in is about this idea of how do we speak up, how do we share, how do we gossip about this, how do we keep talking about it when people think about it and what our church does and the vision of our church, that this is something that's part of what we as a church get to do. And so as pastors, as leaders in your church, you come with a trusted voice, and the people in your church who trust you, they listen to you, they're challenged by your sermons, by when you stand up and speak. And so using those opportunities, those existing moments when you're preaching, when you're teaching, when you're in public, to talk about this time and to share about this missional opportunity that your congregation has, to make them aware of some of the special needs and vulnerabilities of families in your community. These are things that you would be sharing when you have the moments. And so I know another church, in their time when they do baby dedications, they use the baby dedication as an opportunity to share their heart and their vision for their church as a modern day village. And so they call their church to come around these families when they're dedicating them, that we're praying for them, calling them to the different opportunities to care for the families that are inside their church. And so that's an existing moment that they have in their church to really speak up and to keep sharing the story and to welcome in the new families that they have. We also, through our sermons, can be sharing stuff around the First 1,000 Days and calling our church on mission. And so I have some resources that I just quickly want to share with you that you will find on our website. Give me a second. So when we talk about baby dedications, on our website, we have a script that you can use, adapt it. It's a sample, make it your own, put your own words in there. but it's an idea of how you can add first 1,000 days into your baby dedication moment. And so that's one example of how you can use a moment to share with them. And I'm so glad to see we have Pastor Likelele on the call. Welcome, Pastor Likelele. I'm so glad you've joined us today. I know that you have used moments in your church to raise awareness. And I wonder if you just in 2 minutes, Pastor Likelele, if you want to share, how have you gotten your church congregation on board? I know personally you are journeying with the families. You are helping families very practically as in your personal capacity. But how are you encouraging your church members to also care for families? Over to you, Pastor Likelele.
I greet you all in the wonderful name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The issue started when the woman is pregnant. All the church members participate on a baby shower, where everybody within the church will contribute the money equally, and then we'll send somebody to go to buy the gift for the baby. And then along the way, when a woman joined the church, we brought women who came with the children, the mother with the children who joined the church. We also did contribute the money and buy the gift for the little ones. So everybody's starting to be aware now that and also the preaching, during the preaching, because at our church, we've got teachers, 4 teachers at the church. So sometimes I will speak, I will preach, and then encouraging the whole church, for even the teachers at school, they must take care of the community. And then we also have a compassionate ministry, is a structure within the church. The compassionate ministry is also looking after the community. So it's packaged for other members to join others for the community thing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Likelele, for sharing. It's such great examples. I love the idea of a baby shower and doing one as a congregation, that you are then able to do something fun. Everybody can get involved, and the congregation can feel like they're part of it, and they're sharing in that moment. And that's another great example of getting your congregation on board. That it's not just one person journeying with this family, but we as a community, we care about you, we see you, and you belong to our community. And your compassionate ministry is also another great example of calling your congregation to care for the families, for the children. That's part of what you do as a congregation, as you missionally care for the community around you. And so those are great examples, preaching about it, and as you're teaching, using live examples of what's sitting in your congregation. So thank you for sharing those examples with us, Pastor Likelele. So you can see, we don't need to have just one way of raising awareness or getting our church on board. It's about creating multiple opportunities to keep sharing the story, and to help our congregations see how they can play a part, how they can be involved. They don't need to be leading the ministry. They can play their part, and with their gifts and with their strengths. So helping create opportunities in your church to include more people as we think about our first 1,000-day ministry. So I know one church in there, they have a special prayer group that's praying for families in the first 1,000 days. That's including a handful of people who have a passion and a heart for praying for families, but then they might include other people to do something else. And so how do we create opportunities and then invite people in and say, this is why we're doing it? And so part of explaining why, there's a congregation, Omdry community. They launched their first 1,000-day friendly church. If I could share my screen here, this is a photograph. Last year, towards the beginning of last year, they launched their first 1,000-day friendly church ministry, and they took a whole Sunday to launch this ministry. So this is a moment where after they had explained why the first 1,000 days are important and why they see their church getting involved, they then called the families up that were in the first 1,000 days, and they prayed for them and they blessed them. And so they used this Sunday moment to share their heart, to share their vision, and they got various people, not just one person, but there were various people in their team to stand up and to talk about it, and to say, this is what we as a congregation get to do as we care for families in the first 1,000 days. And depending on what your church is doing, you can then call for volunteers. So I know another church here in Cape Town, they also had a launch Sunday over 2 Sundays, and they put up posters in their church talking about the first 1,000 days. We do have some posters sitting on our website. I'll share them with you. They put up posters around their church, something like this. We've got 4 different posters. You can print them off, or you can make your own. And these are things that they put up around their church to say that this is what we as a congregation are doing, and use 2 Sundays to do this. They use their 2 Sundays to call for volunteers and ask volunteers to sign up who might be interested, and shared the opportunities. And then they had a moment with their volunteers afterwards. So it's taking those Sunday moments to share with your church what is happening. So as you've been listening to me, I've been speaking about getting your own heart, growing your own awareness so that you can share that with others. What is your big why? Praying about it, discerning about it. What does it mean for your church? Getting to know your congregation and who you can call on as volunteers or to be part of what you do as a first 1,000 day church. And then very importantly, finding lots of moments to speak up, to share the story, to share like if you've started something, to follow up and then say, church, this is what's been happening every week. We've been meeting with these families, and to keep sharing the story that your church congregation understands what is going on. And so it's at this point that I'd love to hear if there are any examples in the room. If you have examples of where you've tried this already in your congregation, big or small, any examples of what has helped you to get people in your church on board and to join you as a first 1,000 day friendly church. You're welcome to put it in the chat box, or if you would like to unmute and very briefly share with us, I'd love to hear some ideas of what is working in your space.
It was just the alarming the church and the congregation. See, I just stood up in the front and I asked when the life begins. So the church could not answer, some could not answer. Then we read Luke chapter 1, verse 44, that when Mary visited Elizabeth, the children in their womb leaped with joy. So he said, what do we do as Black people to take care of the pregnant women and the young children? You see, we enjoy when they are born, the newborn baby has come, but in no time when she is misbehaving or he is misbehaving, we end up calling the child names. Those names grew up with them, then they become meaningless when they grow up. So as parents, we have to change our mindset, because every child is a blessing. So what should we do in the church now, divided into groups to discuss on what to do? So we are yet to have still answers on how we can start finding volunteers to do that. Thank you.
I love that example. I love the way that you challenged your congregation and showing how that's a beautiful picture of Elizabeth and Mary, and how John and Jesus, we see John leaping in the womb, that the Spirit is with him in the womb. And so that question of when does faith start, when does life begin, such a great prodding question to get your congregation asking them those kind of challenging questions and go, let's think about this. What are we doing? I love your example, and asking them, what can we do to pay attention to this time. So well done for doing that. That's a great live example. So I see Bishop Eric, you've put in the chat box that you are also mobilizing your church at the moment to get involved, and I look forward to hearing the story of how they do that. Pastor Clow, we're still encouraging the church to be involved in First 1,000 Days. It's still a new issue, and they are getting ready to be involved. And that is it's a journey, right? We are, as all of us, including myself, the first time I heard about First 1,000 Day, it was a completely new topic. It's something we've never done before. When we did our research and we spoke to churches, it's something we as churches generally don't know about. And so as you've come on board and joined the church in early life and joined Sikunye, it's something new for you. And it's a journey that we need to take our church on too and help them learn this new topic. And so we can't expect them to get it all in one go. And that's why we need to keep sharing about it, keep coming back to it. That just one sermon once is not going to help them get it. We've got to keep going back and back and back and help different examples, different stories. And so the fact that this is a new issue is wonderful. Well done for starting. And I encourage you to keep going. Rolina, you're saying as a Flourish host, it's very easy for me to have support from the church as they know that I'm doing antenatal and postnatal classes. I'm busy mobilizing the church to donate clothes as they have some families which do not qualify for social grants. So that's a great practical way of calling your church to be involved in that ministry. They can also be praying for you, Rolina. There's so many ways that the church can be part of that Flourish journey that you have. They can be referring families in, and they can be included in that story and sharing those stories. So I'm glad that your church is on board, and it's a wonderful way for churches to be on board with those antenatal classes. Lueta, you're saying also just starting in our newly planted church, so lots happening. Yes, and as a new church, there's lots going on and lots of enthusiasm. So it's a great time to ignite that passion and saying, as a new church, we can start right at the beginning with these families. So excited to see what happens in your new church plant as you do that. You're also saying at the moment you're working in an informal settlement. I have a lot of pregnant moms and women and babies in the first 1,000 days. How I can do first 1,000 days. Okay, so you're also involved in another ministry, and it's also an area that perhaps your church can support you in and pray for you and get involved. And so we can use those stories to engage people, to tell them about what's happening, what is actually happening on the ground. We can get moms and dads to get up and stand and give a testimony and share. If we did home visiting and they've had a great journey with home visiting, we can get them to share what that meant and inspire the church to get involved again. If we've had a mom graduate from Flourish, she can come and stand and one Sunday speak to the church about it and talk about the importance of this support and what this has meant for her. So we can find different ways to keep sharing the story. An axiom that the job's not done until the story's told. And so keep sharing the story, ignite them with vision, and then come back and tell them what's happened. Tell them what story has happened in that space. I would like to share a video of a church that has gotten involved with First 1,000 Days. Some of you may have seen this video, but it's a video of a church here in Cape Town, and they got inspired to be involved in First 1,000 Days. And as you listen to this video, there's a couple of things I want you to listen for. One is how they talk about the first 1,000 days. And then two, what have they done? How did they get their church on board? What was the practical thing that they've been doing? And what are you hearing that you could potentially take away or learn from this church? This church might look completely different from your church, and that's okay. But I think there's lots of great things that we can learn from this church as we listen to their stories.
It's the church. I'm convinced the local church is uniquely positioned and equipped to make a significant impact on the first 1,000 days of a life. And God has had us on a very exciting journey here at the Bay. And I believe there are opportunities for local churches across the country to join hands in serving the youngest and most vulnerable children in our communities.
That first 1,000 days from conception to age 2 is when all of the stimulation and brain growth is happening. So everything that that child is exposed to helps them to create connections between one thing and the other. And in doing that, their brain grows up to 80% of its adult growth in that time. I was really excited when I heard about the Church and Early Life from Common Good when they came to present it. I'd just been through a phase where I was asking God, what now? What is my role? Where do you want me to go? I want to help people and I love moms and babies. And so at that exact time, Common Good came to the Bay and decided to share their findings with us. And I sat there in one of those chairs and I thought, wow, God, that is an answer. That's my answer. Jo and I were at the same research presentation, and I think she was probably sitting there having the same feelings as I was having.
And it was kind of, yes, this is exactly it. It just resonated. And then I literally bumped into Michelle afterwards, who was also just saying, wow, this is exactly what I've been feeling and thinking. I think it just put words to what was already here. And we had no idea what was on the heart of the leadership.
What was really amazing for us that we didn't realize at the time was that God had really been speaking to our leadership and especially to Errol about similar things regarding families and really the need to support families as a whole. So when we did start those conversations, the excitement was amazing to see on Errol's face.
So when the first 1,000 days was introduced to us, it connected all the dots and it provided all the answers to some of the questions we had as a leadership. For me as an elder and a leader in the life of the church, we saw this as a priority because we've seen the fruits of that as people grow older. So why not start when they are younger? Why not start and invest from that early age and see the benefits down the line? And so what the research has helped is to understand how critical it is to look at a child's life and to look at the journey that child takes. And so we could then look at how we are journeying with them because we see people every day.
It was definitely the angle of the research question that really helped me to see things in a different light. How the church is already equipped to support people in the first 1,000 days with those building blocks without any special extra skills or programs, and made me realize that I don't need anything special. I don't need a clinic. We don't need a massive team of people or courses or programs. We just need to be the hands and feet of Jesus and provide the things that he's already taught us as Christians to bring to a community and to our communities and our families.
I guess the church is family, and I think for us that's really key. And to look at the fact that it's not an institution, it's not a club. So there's other amazing services out there, but you make an appointment to go to them. But the church is about relationships. So we build those relationships, and then you're intentional about creating things around that where people have that needed support and care.
So what we did is we used one Sunday, and particularly Michelle and Jo came to share their heart about what they felt. And as a leadership, we shared our hearts around it. And we invited the church, firstly, to look at how we look at the building and how it gets used. And we looked at inviting people who would like to be part of their journey. And we had a very, very big response. It's created a sense of community and understanding that we're all part of this journey together. And it's not an isolated experience. It's been a beautiful journey to see it come together. It's been phenomenal.
So right at the beginning, we started with a couple of home visits, just with moms that we knew that were pregnant, went to their homes and just got to know them and offered some support. And from there, we started to consult some of the moms in the church and say, well, if we had to offer anything for the first 1,000 days, what are the types of things that you feel you would need? And from there, we've started a Sunday morning group.
Our mother and babies room has become a facilitated space, basically. So rather than people just disappearing into there and trying to cope, trying to sort out a screaming child, there's actually somebody there who can give some support and help. And I know, being a mum myself too, you know, you often think, I've just got to cope. And I think that's how we are. But if you're struggling to cope, then that is going to come out in some way to do with your child too. So obviously stress and depression. I think depression is a very hidden thing too. And I think I've actually heard from, I would say, 4 out of the 5 mums in my group that they were all depressed at some point and they didn't know where to go to.
I would say the first 1,000 days is important to everyone, because it doesn't matter what your need or your provision is or what your circumstances are. All of us will need support in one of those areas. Even if you have enough to provide your child with adequate nutrition, you may feel isolated and not have enough family support to be able to respond to your child well in that love foundation phase.
I think I love the description of how when a baby is in the womb, it's protected by that womb. But we all need that. We all need a place where we're protected and cared for and loved and nurtured too. And I think when you're in the situation of being a mum or a primary caregiver, it's often give, give, give. And unless there's things that are put in to replenish that tank, then you run on dry, and that's when the problems start. So I think really it is just that, you know, we need to look that everybody needs that. So we look at providing that for the child, but the mother needs that, or the grandmother needs that too.
So we believe that the church is positioned for impact. We have a mandate, like we believe every church has a mandate. And sometimes our mandates maybe will look different, but in terms of God's tapestry and what He's designed, if we put all of those mandates together, it creates a whole. And that's what we believe we would like to see with Common Good and the network and what we're doing. And as a church, we feel that even your resources must never be your limitations. It's how you, with your heart and your passion and what you believe God is saying, that you'll make things work, that you'll somehow make adjustments where you need to, and also just make a small space available. And out of that, we've seen growth and development take place.
The church is in the community. The church already has credibility. The church has reach. It really would have such an impact if each church reached their community of first 1,000 days. It would change the trajectory of the whole population.
Such a great example of really taking practical steps of getting the church on board and how we can come around families and tenderly care for them as a family, as a church. And so I trust that as you've watched that video, something stood out for you of like steps that they've taken and potentially things that you could use within your space as you think about how you can get your church on board and get more people involved in your first 1,000 days. Asking mothers and fathers, what do they need in the season? What would be helpful as we think about what are the unique challenges to your congregation and to your church. One of the things that we can encourage you to do, if there's people that you're wanting to help understand more, leaders in your church or congregants in your church, you're welcome to invite them to our next The Church and Early Life events. We hold these regularly and they're open to anybody in your congregation. If you're wanting to help them to hear the big picture, the big why first 1,000 days, why the church, they're more than welcome to attend. And so you're welcome to invite them if they want to know more and understand more, you can do that. And so as we close for today, I want you to think about what is your kind of next step? What are you wanting to do as you think about your congregation and the impact your congregation can have on your community and the families around you as you want to inspire and lead with vision. Leaders lead well with vision, when they're able to help your congregation imagine a future of what would look possible, that God would help you to see that vision in your heart. What is kind of sitting with you as you think about what you're needing to do in your space to share this heart and this vision with you? I encourage you to keep looking at our website, and I just want to share one page or 2 pages with you. If you're wanting some ideas of next steps as you try and get your church on board, we have this page under Get Started. There's Get Started for church leaders and Get Started for church members and champions there. I encourage you to go to this, like, church leaders, and what you can do is there's a guide here for church leaders under step 4. And if you click on this guide for church leaders, there's steps that I've spoken about today, or some ideas, practical ideas that I've spoken about today, that you can take. So step-by-step guide for church leaders. If you go onto the step-by-step guide for church leaders, and I can put the link into the chat box in a moment, we have what we call our activation kit here. And here's steps. I spoke about raising your awareness and your conviction so that you can share your heart and passion. There's some things here that you can read and watch and do to try and raise your awareness. Seeing the families around you, what's in your church, what are some of the specific strengths, you can have a look at those. Prayerfully discerning, and then putting a plan together and integrating the whole life of your church, mobilizing your congregation to specific action. These are all ideas around getting you ready to inspire your church and get them on board. So I encourage you to go back to this resource, and that there are some practical ideas there of things that you can do to help get your church on board and to keep going. That we want to see this happening in your church for the long run. I see there's some comments coming into the chat box. Bishop Eric says, we're going to spend time educating the church and community about the importance of the first 1,000 days, and that we can make a positive impact in the lives of our children that will transform our community in the long run. And that is exactly that. Wonderful. That makes me excited. And please share with us as you do that. Send us photographs, share the story of how you go about doing that. We want to learn from you as you do that. As you keep sharing this with your church and community, we need to keep raising the awareness around the first 1,000 days and what we can as individuals, as church communities, do to care for families. So I'd love to hear feedback of how that's going. And as you implement that, please do share the story. We want to keep sharing with each other how we do this, that we can help each other to practically really get the word out there, raise awareness, and inspire people to get involved and engaged. So I look forward to that. Thank you for sharing that, Bishop. It'll be good to hear. Our next practical workshop in March, we are looking at the topic of how to encourage love, play, and talk with families in your church. And so if you remember in our gathering last week, for those of you who attended, we looked at the topic of play, and we're right now looking at everyday play on our social media platforms, so you're welcome to look at that. But in March, we're going to have our practical workshop, the 9th of March, on how to encourage play, love, and talk with our families in our church. So I encourage you to join us, register on our website for the next practical workshop in March, and I look forward to seeing you there. And I just want to say thank you for joining us today. We've reached 2 o'clock. If you've got any other comments or questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box, or you're welcome to stay and chat to me afterwards. But I'm going to close in prayer. I know many have to get back to work, and you've taken time out of your lunchtime to be with us today. So thanks for being with us. So let me pray. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this time. Thank you for this opportunity for us to connect. Thank you that you give us a vision and passion and heart for families and for children, that children and families are on your heart, and that it is because of the vision that you have given us that we can do this. And I pray that you help us all to lead strong in the space, that we are able to inspire those around us to get involved, that we can see true change and see a bright future for our children, for our families, in our communities, and see transformation happening across our country. So I pray that you'd help us all in our spaces to inspire others with the same passion and heart and desire that we have, that we might be burning with passion to see young families cared for and strengthened and children thriving in the first 1,000 days. Thank you for today, and I pray that you keep us safe until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen.